Lance Leipold keeps it going in the transfer portal. Alex Bray, a transfer from Illinois on the defensive line, joins the Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, a little bonus episode because another transfer portal edition for Lance Leipold and KU football is Alex Bray, a transfer defensive end from Illinois, is coming aboard into Lawrence. So we'll break down his game, what he brings to the table, and how he fits in, what the current climate of the defensive line room looks like for KU on this bonus episode of the show. So who is Alex Bray? Well, he will be a junior this upcoming season. He's a 6'4", 270-pound defensive lineman, originally from Chesterfield, Missouri. He went to Marquette High School in Chesterfield. He came out of high school as the 24th ranked prospect in the state of Missouri. He was the 80th ranked edge player, and he was an 87 graded 3-star. Was also a wrestler in high school in addition to his football days. So he ends up going to Illinois, joins the team, spends a couple years there, plays 9 games in his first season, although much more limited snaps. Then in year 2, this past season, he plays almost 400 snaps. He plays in 13 games and becomes a starter for a few games for Illinois as well on the defensive line. So again, he'll be a junior with 2 years left to play. I guess theoretically you could use a red shirt on him, but I don't think that'll be the idea here for KU. And it bolsters your defensive line. You already added Leroy Harris. You lost by Job. That was kind of the replacement to that. This is more of just you were looking to add more competition, more players that can play right away on that defensive line. The beauty of adding Bray is you add somebody who can do that, add somebody who can add competition to the room right away, add somebody who has that ready body for Power 5 football or Power 4 football. But also the beauty of him being a junior is that when you look at some of the defensive ends that are possibly ahead of him being seniors, he gives you the opportunity to not just be a player who's rotating in this year, but possibly be a starter in 2026. We'll break down more on that room in just a moment. This is Locked On Jayhawks. And today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. With FanDuel, it makes betting so easy, whether it's picking your favorite team, picking the team that you have a strong feeling about that night, diving into player props from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. That is with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Our continuing on, Kansas adds Alex Bray, a defensive end transfer from Illinois. So his first year at Illinois, he goes for 2 tackles, 9 games played. Again, very limited sample in terms of, even though we played that amount of games, only 32 snaps you're talking here. So really not much we can take away too much from that. But this season, as a true sophomore, and it is unfortunate he played the 9 games with such limited snaps to avoid the red shirt. But this year as a true sophomore, he played 391 snaps. He ended up being a starter against Minnesota, Michigan State, and Northwestern. Those were 3 of the team's final 5 games, which tells you that he was also getting better as the season went on and was starting to earn even more faith in the coaching staff. You like to see kind of that trajectory. So 391 snaps. He had a 59 about overall PFF grade, 63 in run defense, 73 in tackling, 50 in pass rush, and then he had overall 6 pressures with 5 hurries, 1 quarterback hit. What that tells me, I mean, obviously you're talking about a dude who's 6'4", 270. That is a big defensive end. Now, in Illinois' defense, they're running a 3-4. A 3-4 defensive end is inherently going to be bigger. And so if you're a 3-4 defensive end at Illinois, you become kind of a tweener at Kansas who plays in more of a 4-man front. Are you a smaller defensive tackle than they normally have, or are you a bigger defensive end than they have? I do think Kansas will use that to their advantage, right? You can basically say, hey, in pass rushing situations, sure, he had a 50 pass rush grade, but that was as a defensive end. And in the 3-4 as well, a lot of times the defensive end is not being as like, if you're a good pass rushing defensive end in a 3-4, like those things are, they're unicorns. A lot of times they're being asked to take up blockers because it's the outside linebackers who are going and getting pressure in that type of defense. Anyway, I think Kansas can basically say, hey, on pass rushing downs, we'll slide you inside, right? If it's a pass rushing, if it's 3rd and 8 and we're expecting a pass, instead of running 2 defensive tackles out there and 2 defensive ends, why don't we run 3 defensive ends and 1 defensive tackle, right? And you can basically have him be a better pass rusher than a defensive tackle with a little more speed, even if he's not as good of a pass rusher as some of your defensive ends. So I think you can use it that way. And then on early downs or on running downs, because he was a better run defender, and again, those grades 63 in run defense, 73 in tackling, that's in really his first full year of play as a whatever, I assume 20-year-old, as a sophomore. Like that stuff is probably going to get even better to where you're solidifying your run defense a little bit more. And that is obviously very important. I also think it's interesting too, because I don't know if we'll see this, but I think the idea and the thought process has been behind with DK McDonald, the new coordinator, was previously with the Philadelphia Eagles and with Iowa State, that Kansas is going to run a 4-2-5 defense. More of, and we've seen that at times for Kansas in the past, but more predominantly now with DK McDonald. But I do wonder, because what Iowa State is running now, they're basically running like it's like a 3-3-5 sort of thing. Like it's like 3 high safeties, the 2 corners on the outside. They're running like 3 down linemen, and their linemen are basically just like trying to stop the run and plug run gaps. And I do wonder, is that the ultimate goal? Does DK McDonald eventually want to go to that? And if so, then this guy makes even more sense in that situation. But like I said, he does make sense in what they want to do. You can just play him in different areas. And I think it kind of works out from that regard. But this season, he ended up with 20 tackles as well. Didn't have any sacks, though, like I said, did end up with 6 pressures. But again, I think a better run defender than he was a pass rusher. For what it's worth, in the game against Kansas when Illinois beat KU, that was his second game. He played 15 snaps at a 58 PFF grade. And I mentioned, over the back half of the season, when he was able to start 3 of the final 5 games, that it seemed like maybe he was starting to play better. Maybe the coaching staff was trusting him a little bit more. Well, you look at those final 5 games, again, in which he started 3, he had PFF grades of 64.6 against Minnesota, which at the time was his highest grade. The very next week against Michigan State had an even higher grade of 67.4. And then he goes down to a 53.1 against Rutgers. And then he goes back up to above 60 in the final 2 games. So you're talking about over his final 5 games, 4 of them he was above 60 on PFF grade compared to the first, I guess, what would that be? 8 games of the season, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 games of the season, and he had 2 of those 8 were above 60 on PFF grade. So that's cool to see too, that you have a guy that is improving. And again, if you're looking at the PFF grading scale, a lot of times it's going to, like, you almost don't get credit for like above average plays. It's either you made like a splash play or you didn't. So theoretically, somebody who's consistently at a 60 grade, which is kind of just average, especially in the role that we just talked about, that typically a guy like that is going to play in a 3-4 defense, I think it's a little bit more impressive than the grades might indicate. How does he fit in, though, with the rest of the KU defensive line? Where does he slot? Could he be a starter, second string, third string, future starter, those sort of things? We discuss those next. This episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like playoff atmospheres, whether it's going to an NBA playoff game, NHL playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every hit, every goal, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it easy and fast to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. With Game Time, you have their all-in pricing, which means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay, and they have those last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you for joining us on this bonus episode. Don't forget to check out our Monday episode that'll be coming out, which is What's next on the agenda for KU basketball in the offseason? Been a little quiet lately, so we discussed that on that episode. And thank you to the everydayers and I guess the double dayers who are tuning into the bonus episodes and the everyday episodes as well here on Locked On Jayhawks. All right, so where does Alex Bray fit in with the defensive line? So as I said, I think you might see him play some defensive tackle on pass rush downs. You might see him play some defensive end on run downs. But he also, in a question where KU has had kind of some guys where it's like, okay, you like having some strong side defensive ends that are a little stronger and have a little more weight to them. And there were some guys that you were trying to maybe flex into that this year. Now that you bring in Justice Finkley from Texas and Alex Bray, you feel good about having those two guys there. So I think Bray slides into the strong side behind Finkley. Finkley, somebody who got to have spring ball and also as a senior and a little bit more production at Texas. I would view Bray as the second string until we see what, like, can Dylan Brooks continue to shake off the injury and maybe he'll have more knowledge of the playbook and can usurp him. But I think Bray would be that guy there. And then on the weak side, I would view Dean Miller still as the starter there. I don't know if Dak Brinkley is going to be a weak side or a strong side, but he could factor in either way too. I think Leroy Harris is going to be a weak side, but again, he could, maybe eventually move him there too. He could factor in. And then you have Caleb Redd, who you brought in, redshirt freshman, and then two true freshmen with Adrian Hawley and Garrett Martin. So that's 9 scholarship players on the defensive end room. And you have kind of a good mix of the future players, Hawley, Martin, Redd, Brinkley, the now players, Finkley, Miller, and then kind of a mix of like, okay, there's some future to you. There's some future potential to you if you can hit on, what we think you could be, but also you can contribute right now with like Bray, Brooks, Harris, and I guess Brinkley would overlap into that too. So I like the way the defensive end room looks right now. I think it's hard to say it'd be as good as the one 2 years ago when you had Austin Booker, but can it be better than the one last year? I think it can. I mean, the thing is, you had 3 guys you could really trust at the top, right? With Jeremy Robinson and Dylan Woodkey rotating at one spot and then Dean Miller at the other spot. Those are 3 guys you could really trust. I think you'll be able to trust Finkley. Obviously, you still have Miller. I don't know. I think you'll be able to trust Bray, but it's not as known of a commodity. I do think there's a higher ceiling on this defensive end room than last year's. Now, that comes with a little bit of hindsight because theoretically you thought that, DJ Warner could, raise the ceiling of last year's group a ton. That didn't end up happening. But in hindsight, based on how last year's finished, I do think there's a higher ceiling on this unit. I think the floor is actually kind of similar to where it was a season ago. But this gives you more flexibility. It gives you more depth. And I think when you're fast forwarding to 2026, okay, Finkley's a senior. Dean Miller's a redshirt senior. There's 2 open spots to be at the starting spot if we expect those to be the starters in 2025 come 2026. And I think when Bray would be a senior in 2026, you would expect him to be a starter. So a lot of rotational snaps this year and then starter in 2026. That would be my expectation for Bray. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. Don't forget to check out our regular episode, Talking a Little KU Hoops. See you then.